Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having a great day, and thank you so much for joining TransChat. My name is Nikole Parker, and I am the project coordinator for the TransAction Florida program. And today we are going to talk about a very, very important topic, voting while trans. Now, yes, I know immediately when you hear that, you're thinking, what does that mean? There's a lot of different factors that comes to voting while being trans or non-binary. Whether it comes to identification, name changes, possible discrimination that you can face. And we know as we get closer to November, this is something that we all have to do. We have to exercise our right to vote. So today I have two amazing guests here with me to kind of talk through this process. And I do encourage you, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments and we'll be kind of looking at those comments and we want to answer those. So first and foremost, please help me in joining Simone Chriss with Southern Legal Counsel and Gina Duncan with Equality Florida. Hi.
Hi. Hello.
How are you doing today?
Awesome. Really good.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. First and foremost, Simone, could you talk about some of the work that you do?
Yeah. So my name's Simone Chriss. I'm an attorney with Southern Legal Counsel. We're a nonprofit, public interest, statewide advocacy law firm. We do a lot of public policy and impact litigation. I'm the director of our Transgender Rights Initiative. I do a lot of name change and gender marker change work statewide with folks. I do some representation of trans youth in schools who are facing discrimination, and then impact litigation with issues impacting the trans community, such as access to healthcare and things of that nature. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, and thank you so much for the work that you do. And for those joining us that may not know, Gina, could you talk about some of the work that you do here at Equality Florida?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Gina Duncan. I'm the program director for TransAction, Equality Florida's Transgender Inclusion Initiative. And in my work, our program interfaces with our Safe and Healthy Schools program, public policy, and certainly in reference to transgender rights and protections. And you know, I'm so glad we're doing this webinar today because I don't know if everyone knows out there, but in 2016, the election was decided by so few votes, and Florida was decided by 112,000 votes. And we know that back in 2016, even that a survey was done that polled how many people were openly transgender or non-binary. And in the state of Florida in 2016, that number was 100,000. So the point is that this election, Florida could well tip based on getting out the vote of the trans and non-binary community. And that's why it's so important that everyone knows what to have in place, all of your documentation, and make it a pleasurable and powerful moment to get out and vote.
It's so true. And I know being trans, sometimes I get nervous, even though my identification has changed. It always wasn't, you know, there was a point that it wasn't, and I had to go vote. And I know that people hold that and are nervous. And I'm sure some people didn't go out to vote because of that. So that's the importance of today's conversation, is we really want to answer those questions and really kind of show you what that would be like, so that you know that regardless of your gender identity, we all have the right to vote. So first and foremost, there's so many things that come to mind when you think of voting, but let's kind of talk about, while being trans, identification. So on identification, one of the biggest things in your transition is getting your legal name change. So Simone, can we kind of talk about how does a transgender individual go about updating their name or gender marker in the state of Florida?
Absolutely, thank you. So first and foremost, it's ideal, obviously, for everyone to have their affirmed name as their legal name, to have the gender marker with which they identify, to have identification documents that accurately reflect who they are. I think we all want that, whether we're trans or cis, we want our documents to reflect us. And so, but the first thing to know is you don't have to have a legal name change and to update all of your documents in order to vote. If that's something that is not, you know, you're not able to do before the election, don't worry. If you're registered to vote, it doesn't matter if your gender expression doesn't match what's on your documents. You can't be denied the right to vote if you're eligible to vote. So I just wanted to say that from the offset. That being said, ideally, you want to show up to the polls with documents that reflect the name, the gender marker, the picture, and the signature that reflect you. No problems. So what that requires in the state of Florida is first a legal name change. And many of you might know me from the clinics I do statewide or from the website I created, FloridaNameChange.org.
I love that website.
And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the name change process, I have had so many clients that were terrified to even begin the process because I'm a lawyer and I'm still scared to go into court, if we're being totally honest. So it is a scary thing to do. But the process is not difficult. There's some forms that you fill out, which you can find on FloridaNameChange.org, or you can email me and I'm happy to send them to you. There's a petition for name change and then a few other accompanying forms. You're going to file those forms in person. You can also e-file, but that's trickier. I suggest filing in person at the courthouse in the county where you reside. If you're over 18, you can do this process on your own. You can petition on your own behalf. If you're under 18, you need a parent or legal guardian to petition on your behalf. But after you file the name change petition, you're going to go get fingerprinted for a background check. And all that is, the only point of that is to make sure that you're not trying to run away from the FBI or like avoid debt or something like that, which no one is changing their name to do. And so it doesn't matter if you have a criminal history, as long as you haven't had a felony conviction and had your civil rights revoked, you can get your name changed. I've never had anyone denied, and I've helped hundreds of people. And so you get your fingerprints done for a background check. And then once the results of that background check come back to the county clerk where you filed your name change, they'll let you know that you're going to set up a hearing. And they'll give you a date and you will come to the hearing. And it's a very, very simple, quick process. Very few people have experienced discrimination from judges or clerks or anything like that. But please, if you experience anything negative, any type of discrimination, or even just you're uncomfortable, let me know. And I'm happy to work with the clerks and the judges in that county to work on cultural competency, because we want Florida to be a safe place for everyone. And so you'll have a quick hearing and the judge is just going to ask you a couple questions. What is your dead name? They might not say dead name because not everyone is as woke as us, but they're going to ask what your former legal name is, what the name you're changing it to, why you're changing your name, which the answer can be because I feel like it. You can change your name for any reason. I could go change my name tomorrow from my first name to my middle name. You don't have to out yourself in open court. There's nothing scary about it. If you choose to, you can disclose to the judge, I'm trans and I'm doing my legal name change, yay. But you absolutely do not have to express that. And then he's going to ask if everything in your petition is true and accurate. And that's it. And then they're going to sign the court order for name change, and you now have legally changed your name. And with that piece of paper, that court order, you can go change your name on all of your other documents, including your voter registration. But we'll get to that in a second. The most common question I get is, well, what about my gender marker? Does the judge change that? And the reality in Florida is typically gender marker changes are not done via court order. Miami-Dade and Broward are the only counties that consistently the judges will order those. But the nice thing is you don't need to get your gender marker changed in court. There's no need. All you need is a physician's letter from your doctor that says that you've had appropriate clinical treatment for gender transition. Those are the key words. And on FloridaNameChange.org, it has all the forms that you need. It has the sample doctor's letter. It has everything you need. And so you'll take that doctor's letter that says you've had appropriate clinical treatment for gender transition, and you'll take that to Social Security, and you'll bring the doctor's letter and the court order, and boom, your Social Security record, which is like your fingerprint in the United States. It's the most important document or record. You can change that right then. And then 24 hours later, once it goes through the system, you can go right to the DMV and use the name change court order and the same doctor's letter and update your driver's license. Driver's license is the document that's important for, there's many documents you can use for the voter ID laws in Florida, and Gina's going to talk about that a little later. But having a driver's license that shows your legal name, your correct gender marker, and a picture that looks like you, and a signature that is your name that you feel comfortable with, that is the most validating, and I'm saying this as a cis person, and I'm not, I recognize that I'm saying this as a cis person, but what I found with my clients is that is such a powerful thing to have, is a driver's license that says who you are and validates your authentic identity. You can also then, Florida name change will help you with then doing your passport, your Florida birth certificate, any other documents that you might need updated. All you need is that court order for name change. Any questions about that we will pause in real quick?
On the live, not so much, but there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight. Simone, thank you so much for going through that process, because I know a lot of people really feel that it's such a tedious process, but when you go through it, it is pretty easy for the most part. And two things I'll never forget: before I had my name changed, how ashamed I was to go anywhere and be carded. It just was so embarrassing for them to like look at the ID and then look at me, and it just, I hated it. Once you kind of go through that process and you finally get that ID that has your photo, your name on it, there's literally nothing like it. It's one of the most validating and empowering parts of my transition. And then the second thing, not having to out yourself to the judge. I know a lot of people feel that that's necessary. Like when the judge asks, you kind of freeze and you're like, what is it? And I think that's so powerful to highlight that you don't necessarily have to say it's because I'm trans. You just can say, I want to change my name, or this is just something that I've decided, and they'll accept that. I wish I kind of knew that, because I kind of like outed myself to the judge because I thought I had to. But moving forward, for people that kind of are going through this process now, that's so amazing to know. So
yeah, I think some people also don't realize how much things have changed so rapidly, because I remember when I transitioned, you couldn't change your gender marker on your driver's license until you could show proof of having gender reassignment surgery. You know, we think about that now, how just intrusive that is, and how that is something that should not be something that is required by someone. But I know for the longest time, I was presenting as Gina, and I went down and I changed my driver's license, had my name changed, my picture on there, but I couldn't change my gender marker. And at the time I was the regional manager with Wells Fargo, and I traveled a lot. So every time I went through TSA, I would present my boarding pass and my driver's license, and it had a great picture of Gina on there and this big M. So, you know, I couldn't wait until I could finally get that handled. And it's so much easier now, even though it's stressful and it's difficult, you know, not having to prove that you have had any kind of required medical procedures to change your gender marker on your driver's license is a huge step. And Simone was a huge part of making that happen.
Thank you. And I wanted to mention one other thing that I forgot.
Absolutely.
The other huge obstacle that I hear all the time, other than the fear of kind of the process in court, is that $400 filing fee. And I have clients that have lived in their affirmed gender and name and everything for 20 years and have never done the name change process because they couldn't afford the filing fee. And I want to make sure that everyone knows unequivocally that there is a filing fee waiver. And the courts do not make this obvious on purpose, because they're funded by these fees that people have to pay to do pro se filing. And pro se means without an attorney. On FloridaNameChange.org, you can find it's called the application for indigent status, but it's a filing fee waiver where you just fill out how much money you make and you present it to the clerk. And 9 times out of 10, they will waive that $400 fee for you. So do not let money be an obstacle. And if for any reason they don't waive it and you think that they should, please, please contact me. I'm happy to work with the clerk. It might have been a mistake. It could be from animus or bias. You never know. And if you make too much money to qualify for the indigent filing fee waiver, but you can't afford the $400 fee, don't let that stop you from, you know, having your authentic identity affirmed. Ask for a payment plan where you can pay like $25 a month until it's paid off. So please don't let money be the reason that you are, you know, living in fear of being outed by your ID every day, because there's no need for that. And with the driver's license, so there's a $25 fee to update your driver's license and a $20 fee to update your Florida birth certificate. And if you have any If you have an issue with paying those fees, I know Trans Social down in South Florida, they're an amazing organization. They're willing to help pay those fees. And also, I believe, I just did these clinics for the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and they worked with, I'll put it on here in a little bit when it comes to me, but there's a few organizations in the state that will pay those fees for you. So please, please don't let money be a reason that you're walking around with outdated identification documents.
No, thank you so much for that, because it's true. I've heard that from so many people. It's like, I'll get it done, but I can't pay, and I'll get it done, but I can't pay. And there is a form for that. So thank you for talking about that. So say it's me walking me through the process. I have my name change. What is the next step to ensure that I am ready to vote? Okay.
So actually the voting, updating your voter registration after everything else you'll have done is just a piece of cake. It's this one form right here. And, whoa, it's backwards. It's like a mirror. Sorry. This form right here, you're just going to fill out your, it's the same exact form that you used when you registered to vote. So if you're a first-time voter, you use this form. If you're updating your voter registration, same form. You're going to check the gender marker that matches the gender marker on your ID. So if you've gone ahead with that process and your driver's license now says the correct gender marker, you're going to check that. And then you're going to put for your name, you're just going to write in your new legal name. And down in question 10, it asks for former name. And that's just so they can make sure that they, associate your old record with your new record. And that's it. It's really simple. There's lots of ways that you can go about doing this. I got this nice little PDF offline. Just go to the Supervisor of Elections website for your county or the Florida voter registration application. They have it all over. You can print it out, fill it out, and mail it in. And what's cool is right on the back, it lists every single county and tells you exactly where to mail this. You can also take it in person. If you're not super computer savvy, you're probably not watching this webinar. But I had to help my mom get on. If you're not super computer savvy or you don't want to do it via online or via email or via mail, you can just go right into the tax collector's office, the local supervisor of elections office, and you can fill it out right there in person and hand it to them. And after you update that, they're going to mail you a new card that says the correct name and gender marker and everything. And I wanted to quickly say, so let's say, this upcoming election is very important, I think, for all of us. And let's say that you haven't started seeing a physician yet for gender affirming care, or you haven't, begun medical transition. But you really want to change your legal name and you want documents that show that, but you aren't ready yet, or you don't have access yet to a doctor to write that letter for the gender marker. You can update just your name on these documents and update just your name and signature and even picture or whatever on your driver's license and on your voter registration. You don't have to do it all at once. And you also don't have to update every document. So don't think, okay, I have between now and you have to do this 29 days before the election. So October 22nd? No, October 2nd. I became a lawyer because I'm not good at math.
I was like, I'm wrong over math.
29 days before the election. So if you're like, oh no, I can't do the name change process and my driver's license, social security, passport, birth certificate, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to do all of those things. As long as you update your driver's license after you get the legal name change and then update your voter registration, you'll be good to go. And again, even if you don't have time to go through the legal name change and gender marker change process, you will be protected and allowed to cast your ballot when you vote. And again, Gina's going to go through that in a little bit.
Yeah, please don't ever think that just because your name's not changed as you can't vote. Regardless, all of our votes count, and we really, really need you to go out there and do that. So I want to ask you a question just kind of on the legal side. So I have my name changed, I have my voter registration, and I go to vote. Say I experience some discrimination. What do I do in that moment?
So in a little while, my good friend Gina is going to talk.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah? Okay, so Gina's going to talk in a little bit about you know, what to expect when you arrive at the voting precinct, how to cast your ballot, all that good stuff. But one issue related to discrimination that I wanted to address, because I experienced this in the 2018 election with someone that I helped, is that there was a gentleman who tried to cast his ballot, and he had changed his name. He had legally changed his name and updated his registration and everything. But for some reason, his signature, his voting registration signature, was still his dead name. So he was asked to sign his ballot, or he was asked to sign in, and the poll worker said, "Oh, this name doesn't match. The signature doesn't match." And he's like, "Well, of course it doesn't match. That's my dead name. This is how could the signatures look the same?" And he was forced to ask, which provisional ballots are counted.
Oh, hold on, Simone. I think you're breaking up really quickly. It'll clear in a second.
Yeah, and that certainly is an important point to cover. So Simone, if you're back with us, try that again.
Okay, sorry, we have terrible internet. So provisional ballot counted with the rest of those elected. A provisional ballot, and that is the correct signature. So if your signature doesn't match because you've changed your name or anything like that, you should ask for what's called a signature differs oath. And that's something that statutorily they have to provide you, where you can sign and say, yes, this is my signature. Yes, I recognize that as my old signature. This is my new signature for the same person. If that happens, make sure that you ask for a signature difference form. And make sure if you do have a provisional ballot for any reason that you include them for the authentication form, allow them in the clerk and authenticate your identity so that will be counted. But I do have the because can you guys see me?
Yeah, you came back.
I'm so sorry. So experience that this anybody saw paper at the just like a argument for him.
Really quickly, so having just some technical difficulties, but what she's kind of going over is just in case your signature, say for instance, you had your ID and everything's changed, but the signature was your dead name, for instance, there is a way that you can apply for a document to basically let the courts know that this was my old signature, this is my new signature, and kind of going through that. So please don't let that, I know there's a lot of barriers when it comes to voting and being trans, but please don't let anything like that stop you, because once again, we need your vote. We need that vote to count. So you can always reach out to Southern Legal Counsel Simone to have those questions, or me or Gina at Equality Florida, and we'll be able to either answer those questions for you or send it over to Simone. But Gina, I want to ask you really quick while we're on that subject. So say I have my name changed, say I have my voter registration and everything's good, but I experience discrimination while voting. How do I go about that? What do I do? Who do I tell?
Well, there's a number of ways to get around that. And the first resource that I would point everyone to is our Equality Florida Transgender Voter ID Toolkit. And this is found at equalityflorida.org. Click on Take Action, click on TransAction, then click on our Transgender Voter ID Toolkit. And this will walk you through a step-by-step process of what you need when you go to the polls. And it also gives you actually a one-pager to provide to poll workers if you do experience any kind of discrimination based on usually their lack of knowledge in reference to engaging or enabling a transgender person to vote. It's important to note, that Florida is a voter ID state.
Yeah.
And a voter ID state basically means that when you go to the polls, that you have to present a current valid picture ID. And as hopefully we can get Simone back, but also the signature component of this is also important. So what does that look like? You know, in one of the most impactful and important elections of our lifetime, it's so important that we vote. You know, many people, they elect to vote by mail. I, for one, I like to vote in person. You know, I feel that's my, you know, constitutional right. And as a citizen, I'm going to go and vote and, you know, be darned any experiences that may be negative as being a transgender American. But many people may want to vote by mail. We have the resources, and we will share some resources at the end of this that has that information on there. But in going into the polling booth or the polling place, you need a valid picture ID. And what does that look like? Any one of these is what you can have. So number one, and the easiest, is of course your Florida driver's license. You can also have a Florida identification card issued by the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. You can present your passport. You can present a debit or credit card with some other documentation, a military identification, student ID, retirement center identification. You can even present a neighborhood association identification card, a public assistance identification, a VA health identification card, a license to carry a concealed weapon, oddly enough, an employee identification card issued by any branch, department, agency, or entity of the federal government, the state, the county, or the municipality. So any of these valid current picture IDs are things that you can use. Now, it's important to note that if your picture ID does not contain the signature of your signature, then an additional identification that provides your signature will be required. In some cases, that's as easy as also bringing your utility bill to show not only your name, your address, and substantiate the background information that may not be on these other IDs.
No, thank you for that. I don't think a lot of people realize how many different documents you are able to bring. Most people think, oh, if I don't have my ID, I can't. But we also will put that in the chat as well, all those different documents that you are able to bring, because it's just, once again, I've said it 100 times and I'll say it 101 times, but we need you all to vote so bad. But Simone, welcome back. I wanted to kind of go back really quick to that, because that was really important what you were talking about. So it was, if your signature doesn't match that document that you can fill out in that provisional ballot.
Yes, so if your signature doesn't match because you're signing your new legal name and your dead name is the signature they currently have on record, know your rights and ask for a signature differs oath. And you will be able to sign that to prove that you are the same person. Yes, your signature changed, but people's signatures change because of marriage or, you know, for myriad reasons. So make sure you know to ask for that.
Perfect. Now, I wanted to also ask, just because discrimination is one piece, and I know I'll kind of talk with Gina a bit about that, but what are other common issues that people face when they're updating these documents, like going to the DMV or going to the Social Security office? What are some common issues that you've had clients run into?
So the most common thing, honestly, stems from lack of understanding on behalf of the people that are supposed to be taking your documents and updating them for you. What I found is, honestly, it's very rarely actually animus or bias, though we're in Florida, so, you know, sometimes it is. But oftentimes it's, you know, we all know that clerk that's worked at the DMV for 80 years, and they're like, nope, no changes. It's going to be how it was when I started. And so oftentimes just asking to speak to a supervisor, or honestly, what a lot of my clients do is they call me and then they just put me on the phone with the person that's giving them trouble. And I explain, oh, that's not the law. Let me help you. And so, you know, for instance, like Gina mentioned earlier, sometimes people don't realize that the laws no longer require proof of sexual reassignment surgery, which, you know, we now call gender affirming surgery, gender confirmation surgery. But for a long time, that was the rule. And thanks to a great collaboration with my organization and Equality Florida and Gina, we were able to remove those requirements. And so now you can update your birth certificate, your Florida birth certificate, including a minor child's birth certificate. I know that's not relevant to voting, but just so you know, there's always questions about whether minors can update theirs, and they can. And so if you're told, oh, no, you can't update it because you haven't had, XYZ, they cannot ask you what procedures you've had, whether you've had hormone replacement therapy, whether you've had a surgery. None of that is their business, and they are not allowed to ask. So if you have a doctor's letter that says you've had appropriate clinical treatment for gender transition, that can be whatever you and your doctor decide is right for you. That's no one else's business. They have to update your gender marker. And if you experience issues with that, whether it's at the DMV, at Social Security, the Department of Vital Statistics, Passport, anywhere, please contact me. And they know better. I'll tell you that right now, because I've talked to all of them, the agencies, and they know that they can't deny you a gender marker change. So that's probably the most common obstacle.
No, thank you so much for that. And while we're kind of talking about obstacles, I wanted to ask Gina, so I know that there are obstacles that we can face while voting, while at the poll, speaking to poll workers and things like that. Can you talk to some of those issues that you've had people reach out to you about and kind of solutions to those?
Absolutely. And I think Simone somewhat touched on these. And we really find that issues that arise in voting comes from ignorance of workers at the polling places. And, as Simone said, whether it's intentional bias and discrimination or just lack of knowledge, it's important that we are armed with information and research and knowledge so that we can push back against these things and vote. And all of this information, I once again emphasize, is located at our Transgender Voter ID Toolkit. So let's say you're in mid-transition and you have all the necessary documentation, but maybe you haven't updated the picture on your driver's license. And your picture on your driver's license may not look exactly like you look now. This is not a reason to be turned away to vote. Florida is, again, a photo ID state. It is certainly helpful to bring not only your registration card, but information that has your name and your signature. A utility bill, oddly enough, keeps coming up that is a viable tool to help you to vote. If a poll worker questions your identity or eligibility to vote, show them your utility bill, show them the information that you have. And even if a picture does not exactly look like your current gender expression, you still should be able to vote. If you're still experiencing issues, look for, oftentimes at our polling booths and polling places, there are volunteer attorneys who are there to help people vote. So look for a person who can assist you with that. If no one is around, and these resources, again, will be published at the end of our chat today, but you can call the National Election Protection Hotline. We'll have that number up at the end of the session, and you can make that call. So be sure to have that number with you. So if all else fails, you can call and put that polling place worker on the phone and have them talk to the National Election Protection Hotline. Worst case, if you're still not allowed to vote, even though you have everything that truly should enable you to vote, you can always vote by provisional ballot. It's important to note that provisional ballots have to be returned during a certain period of time, but that's kind of the worst case situation. But I do want to emphasize, and the point of our workshop today, of TransChat today, is really empowering our community. No matter where you are in changing your personal IDs, no matter where you are in your gender physical transition, you should be able to vote in person if you want to. And we want to make sure you have the information and the tools to do this. At our Transgender Voter ID Toolkit, we actually have a one-pager that I would encourage folks to print off and take with you, that if in the worst possible situation, you presented all of the information you know based on your information and you attending our workshop today, that you know you have the information to be able to vote live that day. Hand them this one pager. And this tells them a great deal about, it's a Trans 101 that basically is designed to help polling place workers support the transgender community, understand the transgender community in being able to vote live.
No, that's so important. And thank you for sharing that. And I also want to bring up, I had this conversation with someone, and I kind of forget that because I haven't been 18 in a while. But when you first turn 18, and you're finally able to vote, remember that the ballot is not just for the president. You know what I mean? The ballot goes all the way down. You have to go through all of those categories. And I know sometimes some people just do what they want to and kind of put the ballot in. But I want to kind of speak to the importance of looking through that ballot. And if you're not familiar with one, that's okay. You know what I mean? You can look at sample ballots online. You can see, they'll send you them in the mail as well, like kind of what a sample ballot looks like. And so you can get familiar with the individuals who are running in where you are located. And I also wanted to, and this question's for anybody, say someone is new and wants to figure out who the inclusive candidates are or how better to vote. Where can someone go and kind of find that information on what each candidate stands for and things like that?
At equalityflorida.org, we have a link to progressive candidates running across the state. So you can certainly tap into that information. Or you can reach out to me at equalityflorida.org, and I can certainly provide that information. Equality Florida also has a 501c4, a PAC, and we do endorse progressive candidates every year. And in that light, we continue to work for equal rights and protections of the transgender and non-binary community, not only at the local level, but of course at the state level, and continue to push for passing the Florida Competitive Workforce Act.
Perfect. And I want to also ask, and this is kind of just more opinion, but is there anything that the individual going to vote can do to help with the poll workers to be more understanding and inclusive? I know sometimes like when you meet them, they're either really nice or really not. And I've met all different types, but say somebody is misgendered or something, what can someone say to a poll worker that's not necessarily aggressive, but kind of corrects them and lets them know this is how you address our community? Like, what would be your advice on someone who kind of wants to help a poll worker with that?
I think having the document that Equality Florida has created, the voting guide, and also the National Center for Trans Equality has created one, and there's a few others I've seen that are really good, and maybe bringing a couple copies of those. And if you see someone that clearly doesn't get it and is not only maybe misgendering you or having an issue with you, but you know that other people are going to experience this, throughout the day, and you want to help protect. Just inform them, let them know maybe you didn't know these things. I just want to share this resource with you, or call me and I'll head over there and I'll yell at them.
You heard it here. Simone has our back.
I do voter protection work in Alachua County. I don't know where all of you are, but no one can be discriminated against or intimidated at the polls. It's not acceptable. And there are voter protection teams in every county. I help with the one here in Alachua County, but there are, through the Democratic Party, there are voter protection teams in every county. And there's attorneys like myself who are sitting in a boiler room all day on election day waiting for, that's how I found out about the individual I spoke about earlier, who was denied the ability to vote because of his signature. So make sure that you're reaching out to those resources so that we know what's going on and we can train the individuals that clearly don't know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that there are organizations, both state and national, who work with our election systems at the state and federal level to provide education to poll workers in reference to understanding cultural competency of transgender and non-binary voters. Sometimes there's a concern if someone's gender presentation may not align with their voter ID pictures and things like that, that someone is trying to deceive them and vote in place of someone else, when in reality, it's someone who is transitioning. So having the right information, being armed with knowing your rights when you go to vote as a transgender or non-binary citizen of Florida, and having the one pager introduces you quite plainly as a transgender person. This one pager says this is a transgender person, and it gives them the definition of what being transgender means, and it gives them information in reference to these are the steps you should take to ensure that this person is treated with dignity and respect at the polls.
No, that's amazing. And yeah, we put it in the live comments if anyone needs to find our voter guide. But it's very true. You know, if you feel that you want to help them, give them that. And that can really kind of give them the information that they need on how to properly address trans and non-binary individuals. So as we kind of talk about voting and the importance of voting, I want to bring up two things that if it just makes it even more of an issue of needing to vote. Amendment 4 on the restoration of voting rights, and the Supreme Court ruling on the LGBTQ discrimination. So for our viewers that are watching, Gina, if you could kind of explain, and Simone, whichever, you can kind of explain those two, and then just kind of talk about how they came about, what they are. I know we had an amazing Supreme Court ruling in our favor, which was incredible, and kind of just speaking to that and highlighting some of these issues that really we need to vote on.
Hey, so I apologize. I know my internet's being crazy. There's a huge storm. I'm in Gainesville, and I very much apologize if I cut out. But quickly, if anybody has any questions about whether they are eligible to vote, in 2018, Florida passed Amendment 4, which was the restoration of voting rights for individuals convicted of felonies. So unless you've been convicted or sexual offense felony, those make you ineligible to vote. But otherwise, as long as you're not currently in jail or in prison, on parole, or still owe fines and fees, you should have your right to vote restored. And if you have any questions about that, there's lots of great resources online, and there's places to figure out whether it applies to you, whether your right to vote is restored. So make sure that you don't, for a long time it's been, okay, I know I've had a felony, can't vote, done. That is not the case anymore in Florida. So make sure that you know whether you're eligible to vote and have those voting rights restored. I wanted to quickly touch on the amazing Supreme Court ruling that we got the other day. I've heard a lot of kind of misunderstanding about what the ruling means. And as an attorney who's currently bringing a Title VII case for transgender discrimination, it is very exciting, but it is limited to Title VII, meaning employment discrimination. So if you've been, basically the Supreme Court said that you cannot be discriminated against, whether it's being failed to be hired, being fired, being denied health insurance that covers gender affirming care, anything in the context of employment, you cannot be discriminated against because you are gay, LGBT, transgender, non-binary, etc. You cannot be discriminated against in the context of employment. I've had people reach out to me and say, oh, does this totally undo the HHS rule where they rescinded the Obama era guidance protecting LGBTQ people in healthcare? Unfortunately, it does not. But the nice thing is that Title VII is looked at by courts considering all number of civil rights issues.
It's so true. I remember hearing it, and I had to like reread it. And I'm like, is this really happening right now? But, to have the Supreme Court, vote in our favor was incredible. It reminded me of when marriage equality passed, that same feeling of, I don't think as LGBTQ people, we often feel supported by our government officials. You have your select ones that we know are champions, but when we're looking at the overall kind of government, we don't necessarily feel so supported. So the fact that the Supreme Court ruled in our favor to make sure that we have those protections was like such an amazing success. And Gina, do you want to add anything to that?
Absolutely. It was truly a watershed moment for our community. And, it felt like, and I'm stealing this from Nadine Smith, our executive director, but it felt like a glass of cool water after walking in a hot, dark desert of discrimination for the last 3.5 years and finally getting that sip of cool water. Truly just a bellwether moment in reference to our community. But you know what? Our work isn't done in the fact that this does address workplace protections, but it doesn't address protecting the LGBTQ community in public spaces and in housing. And we look to our own Competitive Workforce Act, which we continue to try to get passed in Florida, and we will continue to do so. But we do reach out and we ask everyone that's listening to my voice to push for expanded and comprehensive protections. We need Governor DeSantis, we need our legislature in Tallahassee to codify that these protections should apply against discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity in the areas of housing and public spaces as well. This is what the Competitive Workforce Act does. This is what over 40 human rights ordinances do across our state. And it's time to finally hear the Supreme Court understand the true definition of sex as a protected class and codify comprehensive protections for the entire community.
It's true. It's only right. You know, when you think about it, it's LGBTQ people, we've been fighting for our rights for so many years that it just kind of becomes natural. But at some point, I believe the goal is that we don't have to fight anymore, you know, for our own specific rights, that our rights are looked at as everybody else's and we can kind of move forward in life. And I'm hoping that the generation, because when you look at generation before me, the conversation of LGBTQ was not, that just wasn't a conversation. And then you have my generation where representation is out there, elected officials are coming out, celebrities are, and it's really becoming a thing. And I'm hoping the following generation, that they're the ones that can eradicate all of this craziness that's going on and really be able to just even the playing field when it comes to human beings. Because at the end of the day, that's all we are as human beings, and we just want to live just authentically. There's a comment in here by Crystal, and I want to thank you for saying that. She said, it's emotionally exhausting for some trans, non-binary, and genderqueer people to have to out themselves to ignorant clerks. And it really is. When you think about it, I say trans and non-binary people, we're all dealt some cards. And one of the cards that we have are the educators. Whether we like it or not, there's always going to be a space that we have to walk in, explain who we are, how we got there, why we're this way, and everything like that. And I asked some of my cisgender friends sometimes, I was like, when do you have to explain your gender identity? Or when do you have to explain your sexuality? And they're like, never. I go into a room and people just assume. And it's a burden that kind of is on us all the time, you know, and I'm sure Gina, you as well, like a lot of the times we have to go and kind of lead that conversation. And sometimes we're just wishing like, can people just know at this point?
Yeah, we find all the trainings that we do. And at this point, TransAction has done over 280 workshops across the country. There still is that ignorance that's out there. And we're always having to work through those issues when they do arise. And really the only good answer to this is, if you can, tap into the resources that we will share with you and tap into the resources from organizations across the state and take the time, find the resources to change your personal IDs. Mm-hmm. If you're at that point and you're transitioning, and again, we're talking to all of our binary siblings out there, if you can, change your personal IDs so that they align with your gender identity and your gender expression, and you will feel more confident in going into a polling place to vote. If not, and I hesitate to say this only because it somewhat speaks to being a second-class citizen, that if you're too uncomfortable in doing that, then you have the option of voting by mail. And we certainly are pushing that everyone vote, everyone take action, especially this year, and vote, whether it's by mail or in person. But if you vote in person, try to have all of your documentation ready so you feel confident and you feel that you're confident that you won't have to have that discussion. You won't have to out yourself. You present your information, you present your ID, you get your ballot, and you vote. Anything to add to that, Simone?
please contact me if you have any questions about name and gender marker change, ID documents, registering to vote. Use FloridaNameChange.org. And I cannot emphasize enough, in the same way that white allies need to be fighting for Black lives, we need cisgender allies fighting for trans lives. And so if you see something, say something. But seriously, if you are at the polls and you see someone being discriminated against for any reason, say something. It is your job. It is your duty. It's incumbent upon all of us. Please, let's all protect each other. Thank you.
No, it's so true. And thank you both so much. And I kind of want to just recap everything. Number one, there shouldn't be any barrier for voting if you're trans or non-binary. If you need any help with that, you can reach out to Simone at Southern Legal Counsel. You can reach out to Gina Duncan with Equality Florida, or me, Nikole Parker, with Equality Florida, and we can kind of help you through that process. Also remember, there's multiple documents that you can bring. You don't just need your driver's license. Gina mentioned them, and they're in the live comments. And also just inform yourself, do your research on your candidates, understand what they stand for, what bills they're rejecting, what bills they are pushing forward, and really just please use your voice to vote. I also wanted to highlight Simone's email really quick. It'll be simone.chriss@southernlegal.org, and we'll put that in the live comments as well. So you can reach out to Simone personally if you have any questions regarding name change, voting, or anything like that. But I want to thank you both so much for joining us today. This was a great conversation. I know it was a lot of information, but I think it's such useful information for individuals, because I know a lot of people feel that they would rather not vote just because they're trans. So thank you both so much. And I just want to ask, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that if anyone does want to vote by mail, you can go to honorthemwithaction.org. And it gives you a step-by-step plan on how to vote by mail easily, simply, and ensure that your vote counts this year.
Yes. And one other thing I will say, if you are hesitant and you want to start the name change process, right now is actually a great time to do it, because due to COVID, there's no hearings in many counties, and the judges are doing it quickly. So I've had a lot of clients be delightfully surprised at how quick and easy the process is right now. So get out there. Make sure your identification documents reflect who you authentically are, and please vote.
Thank you all so much, and
Yeah.
have a great day. And remember, exercise your right to vote. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.